Tonight on Primetime Politics, a changing of the guard. Kirsten Hillman tenders her resignation, announcing her tenure as Canada's ambassador to Washington will end in the new year. What impact will this have on trade negotiations with the United States? We'll speak to former UN Ambassador Bob Rae. Also,
why is it that he wants a carbon tax without a pipeline when what we really need is a pipeline without a carbon tax?
A Conservative motion on Ottawa's MOU with Alberta. Why did the government vote against a motion that echoes its own agreement on pipelines? We'll examine the strategy behind the move. And
there's no way on earth that we would vote for this motion.
The Bloc Québécois leader on that MOU motion, hate crimes and the future of this parliament. This is Primetime Politics. Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Serapio. Well, Kirsten Hillman tendered her resignation this evening, announcing that she will end her time as Canada's ambassador to the United States in the new year. In a statement, Ambassador Hillman writes the following: "It has been the greatest privilege of my life to have served and represented Canada and Canadians during this critical period in Canada-U.S. relations. I arrived in Washington in 2017 to help lead the NAFTA renegotiations during President Trump's first term. In 2019, I assumed leadership of the embassy, and in 2020, I was appointed ambassador by Prime Minister Trudeau. I am deeply grateful to him for providing me with this extraordinary opportunity and entrusting me with this profound responsibility." She goes on to say, most recently, as the Canada-U.S. relationship is being rewritten, I have been deeply grateful for Prime Minister Carney's strong leadership and for the confidence that he has placed in me. While there will never be a perfect time to leave, this is the right time to put a team in place that will see the CUSMA review through to its conclusion. Now, the Prime Minister issued his own statement tonight in response, thanking Ambassador Hillman for her, quote, invaluable counsel and her long record of dedicated service to all Canadians. And for some reaction, we're now reaching out to Bob Rae, Canada's former ambassador to the United Nations. Mr. Rae, thank you for joining us on short notice this evening.
It's a pleasure. People are going to start talking about us, Michael. So
I'll feed the rumor. I'm fine with that. Listen, I want to first and foremost begin with your reaction to the news of Ambassador Hillman's resignation.
Well, I mean, first of all, let me say Ambassador Hillman and I have become very good friends. And her husband, Duncan, and Arlene and I used to see each other in New York or Washington. And in fact, hope to go down to Washington next week to give a talk. And looking forward to seeing her there. So of course, we've talked over time. We talked about things, but above all, I just want to say that she is an outstanding person. She's done an incredible job. I first got to know her during all the terrible situation involving the two Michaels and the government of China, together with our ambassador in China at the time. The two of them were just a tremendous team. And I was very glad to be supporting them in New York and at the UN. So we talked a lot during that time, got to know each other better, and it's just gotten better and better. I think the world of her. I think she's hugely talented, very smart, a great trade negotiator, but really beyond that, a really good diplomat and really thoughtful person, and she really thinks things through. So we're going to miss her, but I think, she feels, I think she said it in her statement, she feels she's been there for 8 years. It's a long time in the life of any diplomat to be there that long, and has been involved in the trade negotiations with the Americans through many administrations. So it is, I think she felt it was time. And I know everyone's going to miss her, but her next chapter will also be very interesting. But I just want to wish her well tonight because I think she's a great, great person.
Great person, as you say, talented, you also said. And really, when you think about the tricky waters that she has navigated from the get-go when it comes to trade, because going to D.C. As Donald Trump was ripping up NAFTA many years ago, back in 2017, what would you say her contributions have been to this country and to Canadians?
Well, I think on several issues. I mean, first of all, overall, the relationship with the United States. She's worked tremendously hard with Congress, with many governors, working with our consuls general across the country. and she's just been terrific. She's a very natural person. She puts on no airs. There's no no falderall of any kind with her. She's a very, very, very hardworking and straightforward person. But as I said before, I think Canadians need to know that the liberation of the two Michaels from jail in China required an immense amount of negotiation with involving the Americans, obviously the Chinese government, and many other governments that were helpful to Canada in getting to a better place. So, and allowing for the freedom of two people who should never have been arrested in the first place. And secondly, I think overall on the trade front, she's done an outstanding job. She's also done a lot of work on the overall security issue around the Arctic issues and all of the concerns that people, I think, quite rightly have about how we can establish a better relationship with the American government. It hasn't been easy, but she's done it with great panache and with a very soft-spoken style. I think she understands that a lot of stuff needs to be done behind the scenes, and she's done that exceptionally well.
Mm-hmm. Exceptionally well, which makes me think about whoever will be her successor, because 2026 will undoubtedly be a tricky year for any Canadian diplomat assuming that post, because it is going to be the year in which CUSMA is reviewed with the United States, with Mexico. What do you think about the challenge that lies ahead for whoever succeeds Kirsten Hillman?
Well, I think it's somebody will take office at a challenging moment, but I mean, good heavens, there haven't been a lot of unchallenging moments in Washington over the last several years. And it's never a quiet or easy job. I think the Prime Minister will appoint somebody in whom they have great confidence. And it has been over many, many years a job that is made by the Prime Minister on a personal basis in terms of finding the right person who can fit the job at the time. I certainly think we got that with Ambassador Hillman. And I wish the Prime Minister well in finding a successor, and look forward to working with whoever that is, because they have an exceptionally important job.
Mm-hmm. Can you suggest qualities that you think the Prime Minister might want to find in the next ambassador?
Well, I think the first one is it's a very personal relationship with the PM and the Foreign Minister. It has to be somebody who both of them have complete confidence in and feel that they trust that person absolutely in exercising their judgment and making representations to the American government, but also pulling together the Canadian team, which, when it comes to looking at the details of a new trade negotiation, will be very complex. And I think that person has to be found and will be found. There are lots of capable and talented people. But in the end, I think everyone needs to understand that it's a choice that's made by the PM.
Mm-hmm. You yourself left a high-profile position, the posting at the United Nations. How difficult is that? On an individual personal level, how difficult is it to walk away from a job that really is quite exciting?
Well, it is exciting, but I think you have to prepare yourself. And I think Ambassador Hillman has been reflecting on this issue for a bit of time. And as I said, she doesn't have any heirs. I think she's got other things she'd be interested in thinking about and trying to do, and I think we'll see that as time goes on. And she is, if I may say so, considerably younger than me. She'll have lots of jobs to do in the future. And I mean, yeah, there's inevitably it's a bit of it's a change which you have to accept. But I'm quite confident that she'll be taking on other big jobs, which will require all of her talents, and she'll be able to put the experience in Washington to great advantage of whoever it is that gives her a job. So I mean, I think it's going to be a very positive experience for her, having had as much time in Washington as she's had. She comes at whatever she does next with a tremendous background and ability to work with all kinds of people and a deep knowledge of the American political scene, but also some of the economic issues facing our two countries.
Yeah, and for now, people very much reflecting on the contribution she has made to this country. Yes. With her posts in Washington.
Absolutely, as they should do. But she's been a trade lawyer. She's a trade lawyer at the WTO in Geneva. She's done a lot of negotiating before she got to Washington, and then she was appointed first of all as a trade negotiator, and then was promoted from that job as ambassador. So she's had tremendous experience in this field, and she's been able to help us enormously in getting to where we are. I mean, let's not forget that with the free trade agreement, as we call it in Canada, CUSMA, we're in a position where most of the goods going across the border are not covered by tariffs. The tariff issue is immediately faced by certain industries like lumber, like aluminum, like steel, and there are others where we have some problematic challenges with the U.S. But the real question is moving on to the longer negotiations. I think what she realized was that was going to be another long period of time, and I think she wanted to take advantage of this moment to try to sort of say this is a time for me to leave and for you to give somebody else this, the big CUSMA job that's coming up, and leave it at that.
Yeah. Well, Bob Rae, always appreciate the time. I don't care if people talk about us. Thank you for this evening.
No problem. Take care.
Take care. Well, back here in Ottawa, a motion went to a vote today, but long before it was voted on, Liberals were calling it a trap, a Conservative motion asking members of the House, particularly the governing Liberals, to support the construction of an Alberta bitumen pipeline to the West Coast. Now, that motion also called on MPs to support an appropriate amendment to allow oil tankers and waters off the BC northern coast. And if all of that sounds familiar, well, it's because those resolutions reflect what already exists in the MOU between Ottawa and Alberta. But it is a more pointed version to end what Conservatives call the government's ambiguity on a pipeline.
He never planned to honor the agreement. He whispered quietly to the Keep It in the Ground Liberal caucus, "Don't worry, there will never be a pipeline. We'll delay it until after the election, and then, God forbid, if we win," he says he would kill it altogether. Why can't he say one thing to all Canadians and champion the pipeline with us today?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the MOU between the Government of Canada and the Province of Alberta is about a pipeline. It is about carbon capture and storage. It is about inner ties with the clean electricity grid of British Columbia. It's about artificial intelligence data centers. It is about an industrial carbon price that works. It is about methane regulations that get methane down 75% so that we can have the lowest emission, low risk, lowest cost oil in the world and build this country.
Well, as suggested, the Conservative motion went down to defeat despite a number of amendments at the end of the day that took their motion closer to what the Carney government negotiated with the provincial government in Alberta. And to talk about this, we're now joined by parliamentary reporter with the National Post, Stephanie Taylor, and Deputy Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star, Alex Ballingall. Hello to both of you.
Hi.
Okay, to be fair, there will be people outside of Ottawa. What on earth happened here? So let's begin with the genesis of this. Exactly what were Conservatives, Stephanie, trying to achieve with this motion?
Opposition parties, as you know, have the ability to kind of force the House to vote on opposition days on a motion. And with this one, they were trying to get the Prime Minister and his government on record, particularly his government on record, whether or not they support a pipeline. Obviously, there is this new energy deal signed with Alberta, as the Prime Minister says. It covers a gambit of things, but at the core of it was the pipeline. And as we know, there's been consternation within the Liberal caucus about how many actually support this pipeline deal. We saw Stephen Guilbeault, now just a Liberal MP, resign over this. So this was really kind of a Conservative attempt to get the Liberals on record about whether or not they agreed with this and try to kind of make more public what has been going on in private discussions, which I would say are not all that private. It's pretty open. A lot of MPs, particularly from British Columbia, and as Mr. Guilbeault, as I said, has been speaking out about this. But it was really trying to the Conservatives to kind of force the government's hand on what has been approved a thorny issue for the caucus.
Okay, I'm going to pick up on a couple of those points in a bit, but Alice, I'm going to bring you in because, as I said, it began as a motion about the pipelines and the tanker ban off the northern coast of British Columbia. But then as the day goes along, they start adding a number of different amendments that brings it actually closer to the MOU. So at the end of the day, why didn't the government just side with this? Because it is designed to embarrass them. Why not just vote with this Conservative motion if so much of it was reflective of what is in the MOU?
I think if they had voted for, if the Liberal position was voting for, they didn't want to do that because, as Stephanie is mentioning, there are some Liberals in caucus that are very uncomfortable with the MOU. So voting in favor of even potentially any element of it could potentially be problematic for those MPs such as Guilbeault and perhaps some others in BC caucus and elsewhere potentially who don't support the idea of a pipeline and are uncomfortable with this whole arrangement and the analysis that it's watering down climate measures and that it's a big retreat from the Trudeau era when there was big national regulations being imposed in an effort to drive down emissions. So I think the Liberals kind of had to vote against it, and the Conservatives could only go so far. They were kind of, today we saw, daring them to put, why don't you just put the whole MOU on the table? But I think they knew the Conservatives wouldn't do that because they're so against one of the other big parts of this deal with Alberta, which is industrial carbon pricing and somehow strengthening that system in that province, which the federal Conservatives are kind of adamantly opposed to that as a tax that they say is raising costs. So I think this is kind of just how the politics played out, where the Liberals they had to vote en masse against it. There was kind of no other choice, and if they had gone the other way, it would have been more difficult for them potentially.
Okay, potentially more difficult. But did it do what the Conservatives were hoping for and expose the division within Liberal ranks? Because at the end of the day, we know there is division, again, evidenced by Stephen Guilbeault, who had an op-ed in your paper today on his concerns about the MOU, his opposition to the MOU. We know that exists, but at the end of the day, if you're the Prime Minister, the government whip, all you care about is to have those votes. So did the Conservatives really achieve anything with this today, do you think?
I don't think they got what they wanted in that, to Alex's point, you see en masse a vote of no, but that doesn't mean the problem does not exist for the Prime Minister and caucus members who are hearing from concerned constituents, be it whether in BC caucus or whether it's some more progressive MPs who do have issues with this. So it didn't make the problem, it maybe didn't expose any more of the problem compared to what we've already know is out in the public. But it's certainly, this is not necessarily a win for the Liberals because this is still an issue that they have to deal with. And this is not an issue that's going to be going away anytime soon. I mean, this MOU has been dominating the news for the past week. We have more deadlines coming up in next April of when there is supposed to be something figured out on this industrial carbon pricing scheme. There's already accusations that Alberta Premier Daniel Smith is maybe walking back or kind of watering down some of what that could actually look like. And you have the federal environment minister saying, you know, we still do want to hold that Alberta to that commitment. So this isn't going away anytime soon, whether or not this motion was put on the table to begin with.
Mm-hmm. Alex, what do you say to that?
I agree that this is an issue that I think, you know, it's dominated the news cycle for the past, whatever it is now, a long time, 3 weeks or something, which is long for a news story. You know, there is that April 1st deadline. And I think right now the government is kind of saying two things at once, which are sort of the two kind of poles inside the deal. One, build a pipeline and expand the fossil fuel sector, and the other, fight climate change and reduce emissions. And those tensions, you know, they're trying to reconcile those tensions, and how they are able to do that, and if they are able to do that, I think will be seen in the April 1st deal on industrial carbon pricing and what that actually looks like, specifically if it's stronger or weaker than what it was supposed to be under the current rules. Same with the clean electricity regulations, same with potentially other things. And then what happens at all with this pipeline proposal, which is still, there's no private sector proponent, there's not really an actual, it's still so hypothetical at this point. So even what happens with that is kind of a wild card as well, if this actually turns more real into an actual proposal, or if this is a pipe dream of a pipeline going on right now.
Yeah. But, you know, and that is essentially the government challenge going forward on this, right? Because, yeah, really, if a private player stepped forward and said, we're in for the pipeline, that actually puts the government into even a deeper conundrum, right? But at the same time, does this expose Pierre Poilievre's own challenge with this MOU? Because at the end of the day, it has been agreed to by one of the most prominent Conservatives in this country, in Premier Danielle Smith.
This is a challenging issue for Mr. Poilievre, no doubt. I mean, it's not good for the federal Conservatives when you have someone like Alberta Premier Daniel Smith seen a net positive to be signing deals with the Prime Minister, seem to be working collaboratively with the Prime Minister, seem to be speaking positively about the Prime Minister in a way that we have not seen from her for a long time. And I think Mr. Poilievre still wants to own the pipeline issue. And so he is going to try to insert himself into this as much as possible. But I also think he's trying to expose some of the fractures that might be happening within the Liberal coalition, right? One of the paths to victory the Conservatives see is perhaps trying to, if the NDP shows some signs of life, and maybe there's a way that the Progressives who voted for the Liberals are turned off by this deal and start to look toward Team Orange in the way that they didn't. So this is both a challenge for Mr. Poilievre, but the Conservatives also see this as a huge opportunity to kind of force the Prime Minister's hand, particularly in terms of how far he is willing to go and what that may mean for Progressives, both in his caucus and who vote for the Liberals.
Yeah, especially if this Parliament doesn't survive and this goes to another vote. Alex.
Yeah, I think that that's definitely a challenge for the Liberals potentially. As the Carney government, if they have, some people reject the political spectrum analogy, but if they've drifted to the center right compared to what Trudeau was, and they're doing things like clasping hands with Danielle Smith and smiling at photo ops and hailing these new deals and stuff, that potentially opens the door for. Not only kind of disquiet amongst the left wing of the Liberal Party, but also potentially an avenue of opportunity for, the Social Democrats in the NDP or the Greens maybe, depending on, for the NDP, maybe which leader they get and where they stand on this. On the NDP, I don't know how deep we want to go on this, but it is an interesting issue for them too, given where some of the provincial NDP branches stand, especially in the prairies, on these issues, and what their next leader, Avi Lewis has his Green New Deal out this week. One of the leadership candidates talking about no new fossil fuel infrastructure, and that becoming potentially a conflict as well inside that party potentially is also something to watch for, I think.
Absolutely, when Heather McPherson represents an Alberta riding. So, okay, watching very closely, but that was the last Conservative opposition day for this year before Parliament rises at the end of the week. So, an interesting way to end it. Stephanie, Alex, thank you for this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that MOU is just one topic that I discussed with the Bloc Québécois leader this afternoon. With Parliament expected to rise for its end-of-year break this week, it was an opportunity to speak with Yves-François Blanchet about that deal, also the government's hate crime legislation, and the future of this Parliament. Take a listen to our conversation. Monsieur Blanchet, bonsoir. Thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
Listen, I want to begin our discussion today on the MOU signed between Ottawa and Alberta. And by the time this interview airs, you will have voted against the Conservative motion today. But I'm wondering if you could talk to us about the concerns you have about this MOU.
Basically, it should not exist at all. The future of Canada, Quebec, the whole world, including Alberta, should not be in oil and gas industry. Alberta should, as anybody else on the planet, start slowly but frankly to change and to go toward a different economy which will not be based on carbon because it is harmful. The Conservatives have presented a motion which basically is made to be a trap for the government. For us, it's very easy. They know we are against it. We will vote against it and see what happens. But it's a problem for the Prime Minister because within his own caucus, part of which was there under Justin Trudeau. And under Justin Trudeau, they pretended to have some environmental considerations, and Mr. Guilbeault was Minister of Environment. So now the caucus seems to be divided, and from within, Mr. Guilbeault is attacking frankly, his own government.
As you say, being critical in that opinion piece that was published today by the Toronto Star, written by Monsieur Guilbeault. But I understand you also have jurisdictional concerns around the MOU, because the Conservatives will say the Prime Minister constitutionally has the power right now to approve a pipeline.
Yeah, that's another part of the question. We said that we would be the most important voice for the the fear that British Columbia should have about this right that the government pretends to have to go through British Columbia against the will of British Columbia and the will of First Nations. If it does happen in British Columbia, it might happen in Quebec. This is why we just became kind of objective allies in this debate. And the law on which they base their action is C5. And C5 by itself is a problem. It's been a long time. We said in June that this law gave the minister the right to suspend the implementation of any Canadian law by his own will, which is absolutely unacceptable in a democracy. And nobody seemed to have noticed so far. And recently there was a paper by El Tirage which reminded us of that, and then there was something in the French media this morning. The government has suspended democracy and the parliament in order to have pipelines go through parts of the territory which might not want it. That's a very, very important problem.
We're quickly running out of time here, but I also want to ask you about Bill C9, the government's hate crime bill. You and the Attorney General reportedly negotiating an amendment, one that removes the current exemption that protects religious text and debate from hate crimes legislation. There are religious groups that are concerned that if you remove that exemption, they will be silenced, they will be unable to practice their faith. What do you say to that concern?
But I don't believe any part of it. First, the law will not have anyone go against a book or go against someone, and nobody knows who wrote it 1,000 or 3,000 years ago. So let's be coherent and logical. Then if somebody decides to say words and sentences which are open invitation to violence, that is a problem. But if the intention is clearly an educative one, or there are some evocation of not so clear things in arts, we understand that the law protects that. But what Adil Sharkawi did in Montreal, pronouncing an open invitation to violence, to genocide against the Jew people, is something which cannot in any way be accepted. The majority of Canadians are in agreement with us about this, and a very large consensus in Quebec says the same thing as we do. So the government had to decide either to put itself at the service of religious minorities or put itself at the service of the whole population of both Canada and Quebec. For the time being, at present time, they seem to be doing the right thing, but as you have seen, it tended to change a lot. We will know much more about it in the coming minutes.
This is also the last week before Parliament rises for Christmas, and I want to ask you, how long do you think this minority Parliament can last? When Parliament came back in September, you talked about giving this government a year. Does it have a year before we go to another election, do you think?
I do not know when we will go into another election, but I do know that more and more people, a lot of them in Quebec and some of them elsewhere in Canada, understand very clearly that this government has been elected pretending things which he never delivered. The genius did not solve the tariff crisis. The genius did not solve the trade crisis. The genius did not solve the climate crisis, and started instead doing other things which he had not said he would do them during the campaign. So people might quite rapidly say, okay, this is not what we voted for, this is not what we wanted. And at such a moment, yes, we could find ourselves into another election. Not in the coming weeks, but let's say that the spring might be a long season for the government.
Well, of course, we are watching very closely. Monsieur Blanchet, merci pour votre temps ce soir.
It's been a pleasure. Au plaisir.
And that is Primetime Politics. I'm Michael Serapia. We're back tomorrow evening. Until then, have a good night.